hit theaters, and of course the crown jewel of summer 2025, an actual FNAF game, Secret of the Mimic. A game that promised to answer all of our questions.
SOTM. Hello? Why is hello? Buffering. Buffering. YouTube? Hello? Buffering.
Kid, specifically his son, David Murray. At the end of the game, you're given a choice. Either give the data diver back or execute something called parachute.exe. This opens up a hatch in the floor leading to the R&D department and the Murray's house that's on top of the hill near the factory. While trying to avoid M2, you can come across 5 film reels showing some good old-fashioned Murray
That's like a cassette tape from VR.
The first is a little uneventful. He gets scared by a new Pirate Roxy puppet and is given his iconic white tiger plushie. The second, Edwin misses because he's too busy working. The third, Edwin breaks the news
I paused it like forever ago.
David that Mummy isn't coming back. By the fourth, we see Edwin give David his slide that we see out the front of Murray's costume manor, with the robotic voice of M1 Fiona coming from off screen. And then finally, we get number 5, where we see Fiona in all her mimicky animatronic glory. She made a cake for David's birthday and is asked to go outside and collect David before the party gets started. And it's that last video that is crucial to solving this mystery. When M1 Fiona presents her cake, we can see the room she's in, and it's not the Murray's family home like all the others. This is actually an office inside Murray's costume manor. And we know that because if you're willing to spend a lot of time avoiding rollerblading Chica, you actually get to see this room firsthand, complete with all the same decorations.
Oh my gosh. Happy birthday, David.
The place looks abandoned. The food has been there a while, now all molded over. And we find out why thanks to the text logs that we have to collect to figure out the password for this room. On December 1st, Edwin sends out a work memo telling the workers that they need to be here on Saturday for David's party. Then there's a bunch of more light-hearted, jokey messages between the other employees about the room code, but on the 6th, the tone shifts. A message tells everyone that the party has been cancelled due to recent tragic events. With the state of the room, the notices we find about not bringing children to work, and the fact that
David got hit by a car.
He got David for one of his birthdays.
My name is David. Dad, I want some ice cream. David, that is my name. David, I want another. David, where is the car? I'm born in another. Wait, where is my ball? I'm running on the road. There is a car, and it is going to hit me. Ah! Meow.
Too dangerous to have a kid near?
Look, I get your concern. I do, but they're almost grounded. This is the perfect spot for David's playground.
It all adds up to this being the day that David died. On Saturday, December 6th, everyone was there gathered together just like Edwin had asked, only for M1 to go down to find David and report him dead.
Okay, everyone hide. Fiona, go get him.
Saturday was the day of the party, and that cancellation message was sent out the same day. December 6th was only on a Saturday once in the 1970s. 1975. Now, given we have 5 film reels, you'd assume that would make this David's 5th birthday.
David died in 1975. That is exactly 10 years before the MCI. MCI is 1985. Bite of 83 happened in 1983. Fredbeard's family died was 1983. Those started before 1983, obviously. The puppet died most likely also in 1983. MCI was 1985. Bite of 87, and also DCI, I believe, was 87. Continuing. Purple Guy died in 1993, or Springtrap in 1993, and then FNAF 3 does not take place in 2018 or in the teens. It takes place in 2020, 2023. FNAF 6 takes place in 2023.
And I think we all know that when you're a kid,
I know timeline.
Candles on your cake matters big time. I guess just like content creators, we all like seeing number go up. There's also the matter of the collectibles scattered
almost 20 mil,
MCI.
game theory, let's go.
You can boot up a minigame on the computers known as Moon.exe. This thing is full of interesting details and symbolism that that we will 100% be exploring in the future, but the detail that's interesting right now is the collectible called the Full Fest Snow Globe. When you find it again inside moon.exe, you can give it a shake, and we're given this description. Opening day snow globe. A wonderful day with all of us at Full Fest. It's worth noting that right behind this snow globe is a statue of a married couple. The man wears a bow tie, which is something we see associated with Edwin throughout the game. I mean, just look at the guy's logo. He loves bow ties. This couple is supposed to be Edwin and Fiona, and so this line about Full Fest is tied to them. But the use of the word all here is telling. If it was just supposed to be Edwin and Fiona, it would have just said both of us or the two of us. But all implies a group, i.e. David is also present. Thanks to Help
David.
2, the earliest Full Fest we know about happened in 1970. So for this to be a big opening day to the point where Fazbear creates a special snow globe, it's likely that it's that year being referenced, 1970. And if Scott cares at all about giving this series any kind of logical consistency, Full Fest would likely have to happen in the autumn. Fine, fall. With David's birthday being established as December 6th, it would be physically impossible for him to also be here on the opening day of Full Fest in 1970, because he wouldn't have been born for another couple of months. So he'd have to have been born at least a year earlier, making him at minimum 6. But then why only show us 5 videos? What happened to the missing birthday? Well, we already know that Edwin is too busy to focus on his kid, hence he made the mimic in the first place. Would it be out of the realm of possibility that he was so busy he didn't even celebrate one of his kids' birthdays? The game certainly seems to think so, because inside the Storytime showroom you can find David's little den with all of his drawings on the wall, and one of them depicts a birthday with David surrounded not by family but by characters, and he has a cake with 4 candles on it. Up until now, David's parties have always been at his house, surrounded by family, not by characters. We never see a video of him having a birthday surrounded by characters, which implies that this is a birthday not caught on camera. Edwin missed his son's 4th birthday. He was so
missing your
busy
child's
trying
birthday?
to save the company and possibly even building M1 that he got his staff to dress up as characters and look after him instead. Then, later, David gets his big slide, and suddenly M1 Fiona exists to take care of David. This puts David...
Fiona died in a fire. Feels interesting saying that out loud. Fiona died in the fire. You know who else died in the fire? Michael Afton and William Afton. And Elizabeth. And Henry. And Charlotte. And the remnants of the MCI that were in Milton Freddy. I'm not forgetting anyone else.
David's 6th birthday in 1975, therefore his date of birth is actually December 6th, 1969. Nice. From here we can actually...
Okay, back then, yes, 1969, nice, I get that, but nowadays it was 1967, Scott. Ah!
extrapolate a few other dates and start to put things into a rough timeline. We never get exact ages for Edwin and Fiona, but we do know that David was their first and only child. In the late 60s and early 70s, the average age of first-time parents was 21.4 years old. And looking at marriages in the late 1960s, the average man was 23, while the average woman...
No wonder it said, like, young us get married and all that earlier, bro. 21? If it was back then, I'd be married in 4 years. No, 3 years.
Woman was about 20 when they got married. If
That's
Fiona
3
was
years
following
younger.
these averages, that would mean they pretty much had David just over a year after getting married, putting their wedding in 1968. On top of that, the average length of an engagement for a couple in the 1960s was around just 3 to 6 months, with the ideal scenario being a full engagement with a spring or summer wedding. And most would only have been dating for 6 months prior to that. So Fiona and Edwin most likely would have gotten engaged in the fall of 1967 and probably only started dating earlier that year. But as I already told you, this relationship ends
FNAF, it's like FNAF, the first game, you find out it's 1993, right? FNAF 2 and FNAF 4 make you go to the past, and FNAF is a location I don't like ever put on the timeline. But other from that, rest of the FNAF games makes you just keep on going into the future. Secret of the Mimic's the only game that makes you actually go really back, because we're going to the 70s and the 60s with a few evidence of the storyline. Like, Secret of the Mimic is what's putting us, like, giving us the true history. Like, when I say history, I meant, like, before the 90s. Because we only have the 80s, right? We only have the 80s. We don't know much before then, but Freddy's been a thing before the 80s. So now we know more about this, even up to the 60s, like their wedding in 67, and like just the business. Secret of the Mimic gave us the history. Because again, Secret of the Mimic takes place in 1979, bro. Like, it's in the 70s. Like, Secret of the Mimic gives us the Secret Mimic is taking us back. FNAF, VR, AR, Help Wanted, Help Wanted 2, Security Breach, Ruined, all put us in the future. And FNAF 6 in the future. FNAF 3 in the future. FNAF 1, base time, just normal. I'm not gonna say present, because present. If I want to say present would be security, would be FNAF VR. That's present, because 2025, right? But because FNAF 6 and FNAF 3 is also present, if you think about it. Both of them happened in 2023, and it's 2025 right now. The 2025 is almost over. 2026, whatever game takes place in that, I think is Help Wanted. Takes place in 2026, that will be the present. But just in general, because 2014 is when it was made, I'm gonna stop. But I'm just saying, with present, when I say present, I mean you have the like 90s. I'm talking about 90s and up, or 90s and before. That's what I'm talking about.
Recording left by Fiona to Edwin, explaining that she needs to go to one of their clients' events to make sure nothing goes wrong.
I have to go help the Fall Fest crew. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong.
Now, remember that
something bad's about to happen to me. Because she died in a fire.
That shows us the married couple, the one representing Edwin and Fiona with the Fall Fest snow globe at their feet, while the woman's statue is described as being burnt and blackened. There's also a stall nearby that focuses on sewing materials, like a stand for someone who was maybe there to help with costumes and puppeteering, similar to what we know Fiona was capable of. That stand is also completely burnt down and destroyed. Putting all of that together, it clearly tells us that the event Fiona went to was Fall Fest, the Fazbear Carnival we've been theorizing about for so long. And just as we've been predicting, it absolutely did end in fire, taking Fiona's life with it. Edwin breaks this news to David on his 3rd birthday, and as we've established, Fall Fest should happen in the fall just before that. So that puts Fiona's death sometime between September and November 1972. So right now, our timeline looks like this. Edwin and Fiona start dating in early 1967. They then get engaged in the fall of that year, which I'm now just realizing might explain why they're in wedding outfits in Moon.exe. They're next to the Fall Fest snow globe. It's the same time of year, almost as if they're going to Fall Fest like some kind of anniversary celebration. Anyway, they get married in 1968 and have David in 1969. A few years passed, and in the fall of 1972, Fiona goes to Fall Fest and dies in a fire. Edwin then creates the fire over the next couple of years. But on the day of David's 6th birthday in 1975, David dies outside the facility. Edwin falls into a pit of despair. He tries to bring back David as M2, but gets angry, beats it up, and disappears, leaving M2 to roam the facility and Fazbear to grow impatient with Edwin's lack of deliverables, and so they send in Arnold to
Fazbear Entertainment in the 70s. Fazbear Entertainment, I bet you Fazbear Entertainment started in the 50s, in the late 50s, early 60s, maybe mid 60s. Like, I would say late 50s to mid 60s is when the Fazbear Entertainment started. I believe they're in the, they have to be a thing in the 60s.
We're able to track thanks to all of this. The death of Murray Sr. Now, look, I know he may not seem
Murray
like
Sr. definitely did stuff with Fazbear.
Let's be honest, he's kind of a footnote in the whole game. We only see his portrait a couple of times, and we only get 2 audio logs even mentioning him. But those 2 audio logs reveal a lot, not only about when he died, but also the final order of events for Murray's Costume Manor, and an interesting detail about our favorite singing bear company. In the audio log where we learn about Murray Sr.'s passing, it's a conversation between Edwin and Fiona. So they do have to have at least met at this point. Plus, they seem quite close.
The company is going to collapse and they're all going to hate me.
Ed, you'll figure it out. Just take a deep breath. It's your company now. Your dad believed in you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left it to you.
She's being encouraging in the way that a supportive partner would and should. So they're most likely
Yeah.
at least dating when he passes. But the real key comes
Yeah.
when you backtrack through the entire game to find this specific Mr. Helpful. I mentioned earlier how we get new permissions for our data diver throughout the game to access new areas. Well, that isn't the only thing you get to access. The Mr. and Mrs. Helpfuls throughout the facility also have different responses depending on the staff level that is talking to them. If you go back and find them all once you get executive level access, we actually start to hear messages recorded by Edwin or Fiona directly addressing one another. And this one right here is very interesting indeed.
I've got something very important to ask you. Okay, here goes. You become the heart of this company, and I want to share it with you. And you're also really pretty, like asymmetrical pretty. So,
Nerd.
will you marry me, please?
Yes, it's very nerdy and very sweet, just like how I proposed. The point is, during Edwin's awkward ramblings, he says this line.
You become the heart of this company.
You are the heart of the company. When they met, she was just a new employee. There's no way she would be that instrumental to the company and its quote-unquote heart. However, once Murray Sr. passed on and Edwin was left in charge, Fiona became his main collaborator. She is the one who cared for the employees and the company while Edwin was off making more crazy inventions. We can even hear her concern during the pre-recorded elevator repair tapes.
Please follow the instructions to reset the elevator.
Sounds scary.
It feels like she's reading a script and she's kind of
it
concerned
may
about what
already
she's
be
reading.
It's only once Edwin takes over that Fiona has the opportunity to fill the position as the heart of the company. And also, I mean, this recording is on a helpful. One of the things that Edwin would only have been able to install fully once he'd taken over.
Could start making some of my inventions for real.
All of that to say that Murray Sr. died sometime between Edwin and Fiona dating and them getting engaged, placing it sometime in 1967. And that's an important
Getting
detail
our money.
because while it seems early in most timelines for this franchise, Murray Sr. appears to have some kind of connection with Fazbear Entertainment, even before he passes and hands the company over to Edwin. In a number of the audio logs you can find later on in the game, it becomes very clear that Edwin is getting a little bit paranoid.
Edwin,
That's
never
fair.
forget, they're behind it. Don't trust them. Never tell them they want to destroy you. Dad was right.
Now, you may be asking, who is this them and what is it he's not supposed to be telling them? Well, through another couple of audio and text logs, both of those answers become quite easy to figure out. In literally the next audio log you can obtain, Edwin tells us that there's a leak in the company.
I figured it out.
Yeah.
There's a leak.
I heard a thing about Henry working for MCM beforehand, and Fazbear Entertainment did a thing. That might be a thing.
Someone
Maybe
told
Henry
them
worked for
about
MCM.
it.
I don't know.
They can't have it.
But I know
Entry,
Henry and
the
William
brand new
hold
mimic that can adjust
him.
to any costume and mimic any character or person is what's being leaked. And with that in mind, the they becomes even easier to figure out. A bunch of the text logs have a consistent running theme. Working for Murray's Costume Manor sucks. They want out.
One more injury and I'm out of here. I mean it this time. Barb, I swear, if I hear that song one more time, I'm going to tear that dolly off her hinges. I have no clue how much longer I can take it here.
Some of them leave on their own accord, while others are being poached by a rival company.
We're almost there. I need the rest of the Murray staff contact info. The sooner the better. You get that for me, and I can sweeten the deal. How would you like to
William
manage
Afton's
one of the new
emailing this, bro.
franchise locations?
William Afton.
W-
That was William Afton.
A.
That's right, good
WA.
old Willie A is here, and he's as evil a businessman as we always thought. Fazbear is actively stealing not just employees, but their business secrets. So, it's Fazbear that is, quote, behind it. They are the ones who want to destroy Edwin, and he is reminding himself to not let them have the Mimic program. But do you remember the last thing he said?
Dad was right.
Dad was right. This mini paranoid speech is all about how Fazbear isn't to be trusted. And those words of advice came from Edwin's father. How? Because clearly Murray Sr. knew about Fazbear, Afton, and all of their shady business practices. Either because Murray Sr. was already in business with them
Probably as
prior
old
to his
as
death,
after
or
him,
simply
bro, I
because
swear.
MCM had been around for a while, and so he'd have likely seen how they operated and how small businesses they were working with suddenly disappeared. And so he made sure to warn his son about them. We all knew that Fazbear had been around a lot longer than we thought with the introduction of the 1970s Fall Fest poster in Help Wanted 2, but now it seems that they go back even further. Sure, it's only a few more years on paper, but just like everything in this game, we're being shown that we can't strictly rely on what we think we know as definitive. If we thought this prequel destroyed our understanding of the franchise, just wait until we learn about what was going on before all of this. First, it's a few more years into the 1960s, but who knows how far back it goes. Maybe Matt and I weren't so far off with the whole singing bear in the 1930s.
But with that, let's move on to our second character, the one-of-a-kind villain, the Mimic.
Well, actually, despite me referring to it as the Mimic this whole time, the
Yeah,
one
it's
key
fucking
thing
Mimic,
Secret
oh,
Mimic
yeah,
was
man, it's
very
fucking
clear
Mimic,
about,
oh.
it's really not one of a kind at all. Which, to be fair, is something we've been believing for a while now. In Tales
Yeah.
from the Pizzaplex, we see two versions of the Mimic. The Mimic 1 program, which was the Mimic software that Edwin Murray created to put into a half-finished endoskeleton to play with his son David, which was then later used by Fazbear in The Storyteller. And then there's the Mimic 2, which was Fazbear's improvements on the original design, creating an endoskeleton that could change its shape and size to fit any costume or animatronic. However, how all of that tied into things like Security Breach and Ruin were pretty speculative, especially as we didn't even know if the book stories were in the same continuity and whether we could rely on them wholesale or not. My personal theory was that yes, those two mimics were indeed present in Security Breach, with the Mimic 2 being the physical endoskeleton we find in the basement of Ruin, and the Mimic 1 program being what
Glitch
we
Trap.
now know as Glitch Trap, taking over Fazbear's systems and using it to manipulate people into doing its bidding, like Helpy does to Cassie in Ruin, which is why we get this interaction between Helpy and the totally real Gregory arguing.
I took care of it.
The area is safe now.
But now we do have a definitive backstory for the Mimic inside the game continuity. It turns out that yes, there are indeed two in-game mimics, but there are some key differences from their book counterparts, and that drastically changes our entire understanding of Security Breach, Ruin, and the program that was trying to keep the Mimic underground, Mexes. So hop into that definitely working elevator, friends, as we plummet down into the depths of Murray's Costume Manor to discover the real secret of the Mimic. So what does this game actually tell us about the game universe's version of the Mimic? Well, like most things in this game, it's similar but different to what we were expecting. Edwin does create the original Mimic, M1, to babysit David.
Think of it as your new babysitter, but it doesn't get paid and go home. It'll stay with us and help around the house.
But he also states that it was created to work inside multiple costumes.
It'll wear fun costumes. It can fit into any costume we've created.
Essentially, the game's lore has combined the purposes of the books M1 and M2 into one creation, and attributed all of it to Edwin, rather than one being a Fazbear creation, just like basically everything in this game. But this M1 also develops a little more than its book counterpart.
This is where I heard it. It's her or someone that sounds like her.
That's good, honey, but from the party.
M1 begins showing signs of mimicking the deceased wife of its creator, literally mimicking the role of David's primary caretaker, his mother, Fiona. As we discussed last time, Fiona tragically died in a fire at Fall Fest, and this totally destroys Edwin's mental state.
I can't do this alone.
So naturally, when he starts thinking he's hearing the voice of his wife, he leans in hard. By David's last birthday, M1 is still not wearing any costumes like Edwin said it would, but instead it is mimicking Fiona perfectly, baking a cake, hanging decorations, all of that good stuff.
I baked it myself for David's special day.
This is where Edwin's second tragedy strikes. M1 Fiona goes down to get David while everyone is waiting to celebrate him, only for them to discover that David is dead. Again, Edwin is destroyed by this. But this time, M1 Fiona is here, and she has a quick and easy solution.
You need to try again. Build another.
The two go back and forth over this for a while, but eventually Edwin gives in and begins attempting to make a new mimic that will mimic his dead son. However, it doesn't really seem to be working.
Every copy has failed. failed. I don't even know why it worked the first time, but it did.
The only reference Edwin has for the mimic idea working is M1, which leads to Edwin's final gambit. In one of the text logs we receive after meeting M1 Fiona during the parachute ending, it says, the M2 began as a copy of my program. This log has been sent by M1 to Edwin's machine. In order to make M2 work, Edwin simply made a copy of her programming. I guess if you can't figure out how it worked the first time, just duplicate the thing that already works. And it does work. It's just a little too much for Edwin to handle.
You're not him. You're not. Stop sounding like him.
This moment is what turned M2 into the killing machine we now find in the game, and its first victim, the man who tried to destroy it.
Due to a minor detonation, there is damage to my office interior.
And that is essentially everything we know from the game itself. It's unclear exactly what happens next to get us to Security Breach and Ruin. It's gonna depend heavily on which ending is canon and what happens in the inevitable DLC that Steelworld does for all of their FNAF games.
Really, the canon end is when you crash.
Being about Fall Fest. I
after you
proved last
leave.
time that the game takes place in September 1979, so Fall Fest would likely be in full swing, and the Mimic is free in every ending. But regardless of whether I'm right about that, one thing I am sure about is that at some point M2 is going to be trapped inside MCM. It will get cemented up only for us to go down into the basement of Ruin and find it again. Now, I know what you're thinking. These two characters don't look anything alike.
It's been literally 60 years. Around 60, almost 60. 19, if the Mimic was made way before then. But I'm going from the Secret Amendment gameplay. Again, it's like 19, it's really more like 1975, between 1975 and 1970, whatever, but 1979 to 2035, rather, that's how long.
But just take a look around first. We have a springlock scooper, wooden boxes filled with costumes like crows, elephants, and lions, the similar flooring and wood panel walls with builders' lights hanging from them. Everything we're seeing at MCM matches stuff that we saw underground when we encountered the Mimic in Ruin. We can also find endoskeleton pieces deep within MCM from when Edwin was experimenting trying to create the Mimic. And if you look closely, some of them don't really match the current version of the Mimic, but they match the endoskeleton of the Mimic that we find in Ruin. My guess is that in the lead up to it being cemented, or even during the cementing up of MCM itself, it ended up getting damaged, or some of the pieces just stopped working over time, and so it replaces its parts one by one. We've already seen it replace its legs, so what's an arm, or a torso, or a head? Finally though, the Mimic in Ruin, it acts just like the M2 we see in Secret of the Mimic. It's mimicking a young boy, Gregory, it's wearing mascot costumes, and it's being violent towards humans. It even walks in a similar fashion and gets its hand stuck in an elevator. Now, that last one doesn't strictly make the two characters the same. Anyone can get their arm stuck in an elevator. But the fact that Steelworld programmed that in, along with all the other things we've talked about, it seems like they're trying to tie together these characters and this area, telling us that the Pizzaplex, and by association FNAF 6, was built on top of MCM, locking away all of its inventions down here, including M2 itself. I mean, we know that Fazbear isn't against saving some cash by building on top of previous establishments, and there's one text log directly
Done that
from the
5
game itself
times.
that tells
Not
us
5,
that he
like 3.
owns the land which MCM stands on. But that's only one of the Mimics answered for. What about M1? Well, to start with, she's just chilling inside a computer. Yeah, it seems that not only was M2 a copy of M1's programming, he also put M2 into the very same endoskeleton. Just look at them side by side. They're identical. Well, besides the legs, because, you know. And we don't see another one of these endoskeletons walking around or even decommissioned. So all signs are pointing to Edwin removing the M1 program from the endoskeleton, putting M2 into the endoskeleton, and leaving M1 as just a program inside the computer that we find during the parachute ending.
It is nice to meet you face to face.
But as I'm sure most of you have realized,
Yes,
this isn't
face to
just
face.
any computer. This is the same computer that we found down in the basement of Ruin, the one that was running the Mexes program, the big digital genie bunny that is keeping M2 locked away underneath the Pizzaplex. Does this mean Fiona is Mexes? Has Mexes actually been the M1 Mimic like we first suspected when we saw the trailers for Ruin? I actually got asked about this during the theory crafting livestream we did immediately after our GT Live playthrough, which is what inspired me to do this episode in the first place. So thanks for showing up and being a part of that if that was you. At the time, it stumped me, but now that I've actually had some time to think about it, I believe I do have an answer. And that answer is, not quite. Honestly, it just doesn't make sense for Fiona to be a big blue bunny. Now, yes, I know what series we're talking about. FNAF rarely makes sense, but hear me out. We've always talked about how the Fazbear characters tend to be used as symbolism in these games. Freddy tends to be representative of Henry, for example. But in this game, we're also shown that Fiona was the one who designed Foxy and Chica. So if something is meant to represent her, it's more likely going to be one of those two. In my opinion, most likely Foxy. He was originally a puppet and she was a puppeteer. But Bonnie has always represented Afton. Afton was the reason Edwin was locked away in the R&D department and in his home, working on the new restaurant concept, keeping him away from his family, his son, which led to his death and eventually to him creating a violent and destructive mimic. So rather than Mixes being a representation of Fiona, it's far more fitting that it's a representation of Afton. This new mimic has taken on part of Edwin's personality, the violent part, and is now being kept locked away by another blue rabbit. Like father, like son. But the real reason I don't think they're one and the same is because of the parachute ending. During it, we have to activate something called cradle.exe. We first hear about what this cradle is from one of the text logs. A handful of these logs seem to be addressed to Edwin and have a subject line written in binary, like a computer program trying to communicate, i.e. M1. One of these specifically asks Edwin to consider building the cradle if he won't fix M2's programming, and provides him with the blueprints for it. She describes it as a computer, bigger than anything he's built before, which sounds familiar on its own, but if you stop just before executing cradle.exe, you can see that it has a description. Mechanical X-form experimental storage.
We'll stop right here. We'll continue later.